it does not perturb me at all to be the only person in the room that looks like me, because that was my reality for a very, very long time. And when you get to high school, there was a bit more of us, but we were still in the minority. But I went to probably one of the most racist.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
When the powerhouse that is Christine Rudairo Mudavanhu reaches out to you and says, I have written a book, it has been published, and I would love to come on your podcast to talk about it with your audience, you say yes. You jump up and down and you say yes. And that is exactly what I did. And so this conversation today is one that is absolutely special. You will love Christine. She is somebody who doesn't mince her words. She says what she means and she means what she says. And she goes there. She doesn't hold back. She calls a spade and not a big spoon. She takes us there. She really is bold in how she shares her vision. And the birthing of this book, Sisters in Color, she is absolutely captivating. By the time we were done having this conversation, I literally felt like my cup was just being filled. And I was being fueled up for this year that is 2026. And so let me read Christine's bio for you because this is a conversation I want us to get into ASAP. So Rudairo Mudavanhu is an entrepreneur, author, podcaster, and community leader. She is the CEO of UC Compliance and the founding partner of Utano Global and Migrant Women in Business, where she champions cultural responsiveness, equity, and opportunities for women of color and migrant communities. Rudairo is the author of the Sisters in Color book and host of the Sisters in Color podcast platforms dedicated to amplifying diverse voices and reshaping the face of leadership. Her work blends innovation with impact, from integrating virtual reality into DEI training to build networks that foster belonging and empowerment. She has been recognized with the Women in Tech Award for 2023 and the Queensland Day Award for Services to the Logan community in 2024 for her leadership and contribution to social and economic inclusion. Without further ado, here is my beautiful friend, Christine Rudairo Mudavanhu. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Represented Podcast and a very, very happy new year to you all. Happy 2026, if I haven't wished you already. And today I am delighted and excited. The first guest for 2026 is Christine Mudavanhu. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, for having me. You are one person. We may not see each other often, but we're definitely kindred spirits. I love everything you're doing with Represented. I've been following your coaching career and how that's blown up. So I'm just honored that, I am your first guest for 2026. And I'm honored to be here with you today.
Oh, when you wrote to me, you WhatsApped me and you told me, I've got this thing going. I'm writing a book. I'm releasing it, and I'd love to come on your podcast and talk about it. And I thought, yes, absolutely. I would be so happy to have you. And this is now happening. But I want us to take a few steps back before we talk about the book, and that will be the focus of our conversation today. But I had you on here what I used to call Migrant Women of Color Rising. It was an IGTV series that was also on my YouTube channel, where this conversation will be as well. And that's where I introduced you to my audience, many of who loved you so much. And we ended up doing an event together, Christine, in
Yes, we did.
Brisbane. We did that
Yes,
event around COVID time.
yes,
Very restricted times, but we
very
did an event
strict
where
time.
you facilitated that event for
Yes.
me, and we met for the first time. But a lot has happened since then. And in the first conversation, Migrant Women of Color Rising, you
Hmm.
shared how you moved from Zimbabwe to New Zealand to then Australia and began the career and the path that you've undertaken. And so I kind of want to pick up from where we left off because I know a lot has evolved in the last
Yes.
3 or 4 years since we were together. And so,
Hmm.
what has evolved as far as your career has gone, Chris?
Well, and it's really interesting because, you know, I was thinking about my career. I couldn't have written this career when I was, uh, you know, in my teens. Like what I do now was not even a job. It wasn't even a concept. It wasn't even thought of as a concept. The work that we're doing around DEI, all of that was not uh, in the way that we're doing it,
Mhm.
wasn't it? So much has evolved and so much has changed. But for me personally, what has evolved is there's been a lot of crystallization around my messaging. Where do I resonate? What do I resonate with? And I think the last time when I was on your podcast, I was championing migrant women in business, a
Yes.
platform where we have grassroots migrant women, small businesses, and these are women who basically would never get a job. They would, but entrepreneurship was a way for them to earn an income. And a lot of them, English was not necessarily their first language. They weren't exactly what the employers are looking for in this space. We all know Australia and the kind of market that we live in Australia, and we don't talk about the elephant in the room, the segregation, the bias around how you look, the bias around how you sound, and God forbid you have an accent, all of these things that really bar your entry into the corporate workspace. And people can boo hoo hoo and say these things don't exist. When you talk to the people on the ground who are wanting their CVs, that's what we call it. When you blank out your last name, I go by my middle name, Christine. I don't even use my first name, Rudairo, simply because it's too hard for people to pronounce and all of these things. So I was in that space. And I was also in the space where Sisters in Color has always been part of my journey. It's a conversation. And that platform has always been for interviewing and having conversations with women of color and just the women that are leading. I've always wanted to have this space that I keep curating where these women who people don't know because they're just getting on with it, like they don't have time to be setting up focus groups, doing all of these things because they're out there, they're leading enterprise, they're out there trying to smash that glass ceiling, and we all know how difficult that is. And in every single situation they are carrying the pressure that they can't fail, because if they fail it not only goes on them but it goes on all womanhood, not only just womanhood but womanhood of color. And it's like, oh, these people, like, we all know that this exists, so they're carrying that mental load. So for them, and Michelle Obama, I think, articulated it really, really well when she talked about her tenure in the White House and
Mhm.
how you know the curation of the perfection around that was very, very deliberate. They could not afford to put a wrong step because they were the first that were
Mhm.
there. And so that came with tremendous responsibility. So Sisters in Color carries the voice of a lot of these women who are the first. But these are women who are thriving, who are at the top of their game. So between the time of then and now, we've kind of had to hibernate migrant women in business because our funding ended for government. And one of the things that was really, really challenging with a lot of the work that we were doing was because it has that charity and almost that white savior and that subservient, begging bowl. Not that that was the intent, but that is how often a lot of the program get packaged because you have to apply for grants and it takes, sometimes more effort to apply the grant than the amount of money you've got. Then you've got the acquittals process, you've got all of this. So when the funding came for that, we did establish some really great women through that program, but we didn't secure more funding from the Victoria government at the time. There was a change of government, so we couldn't continue that program in that space. So while everything that goes with that program is on a bit of a back burner, we can easily resurrect it at a future date. I sort of stepped away a little bit from that because the energy that was taking, it wasn't giving us the steps that we wanted and it wasn't making quite the impact.
Yeah.
I also then in business realized the DEI conversation, you're in DEI, it was changing right around the world. There was a time where, DEI was, the darling child. Everybody had a diversity something, either
Yeah.
you were a diversity CFO, whatever, people and culture, all of these terminologies that we saw, merging in the global scale. And then you started to see people pull back from the messaging. Even before Trumpism came in, the whole world was kind of like pulling back. You saw the big tech giants kind of pulling back. And that was because people kind of threw money at things, but didn't actually sit and think through what does this look like? And didn't embed it into the organization. It was more ticking the box
Absolutely.
exercise. So Utano Global was really linked to a lot of that movement. But we were finding our work in Australia with Australian big companies only came through America because America is really championing that because America's got, different problems with all the race and all sorts of issues. Australia's got, it's not that race is not an issue here. It is an issue, don't get me
It's
wrong.
different
But
here.
America, it's very different. So what we were finding here was gender politics was the big thing that people at a corporate level were really willing to get into, but gender not through the lens of a woman of color, right? Because that involves the whole intersectionality, that involves, layers upon layers of, piercing. And so piercing that veil to actually have a look at, okay, where do we fit into that conversation? And I remember jokingly, and this was said in jest, please can nobody take this comment really seriously. One of my really close, dear Australian friends said to me, Christine, we as white women can't even get in. Imagine you on the
Wow.
was we were just joking, and she was like, oh, think about it. That is how deep the patriarchy in
Mm.
this society runs. She's like, we're sitting on there. She's like, we're sitting on there, and you know how deep racism runs. If we can't even get a look in. So imagine, with the layers that you have on, how much more you're going to struggle. So it was in that spirit I started to look at saying, okay, we're going to have to start creating our own spaces. We're going to have to start amplifying. But I also then knew that there was a group of women that were there. There was a group of women who had made it. There was a group of women that were thriving. And guess what? She knew these women. Guess what? I actually spoke to these women all the time because I stalk them on LinkedIn. I stalk them at because there was a period in my life where I was the networking queen. I went absolutely everywhere. Any business event, I was there. I wanted to get, and the first thing I would look for, I saw a woman of color, would make sure I got her details, connected with her. So I have over time built this rich repository of just amazing women who've got the right kind of energy. We wish each other well. When we come together, our conversations are positive, they're constructive. We are so busy building. We don't have time to tear anybody down. We
Yes.
are really rooting for the other woman to win.
And what I loved, Chris, what that you shared before I press record is that the niche with which you are amplifying. It is a very unique niche because we often know the journey of women of color, whether they be in corporate, trying to climb the corporate ladder, whether they be entrepreneurs who are, trying to build and make a sustainable living through that. But your niche, or rather the focus, is amplifying women who are already in the C-suite, executives. And I think that is
Yeah.
so unique and extremely inspiring. And so talk to
Mhm.
me about identifying that and wanting to amplify that.
Yeah. So this book here, Sisters in Color,
Sisters in
is
Color.
um, is an amplification of my podcast that already exists, Sisters in Color. So, what I wanted to do with Sisters in Color was I really wanted to have conversations with the women that were in the C suite, the women that were leading, because these were the women that were making the decisions that was going to impact. The masses. And I was like, well, if I want to have massive impact, I need to get to know these women. They already have access, they already have the resources, they're already here, but they also don't have that sisterhood that's supporting their here-ness. I know that's not a correct word, but supporting their presence, that's amplifying who they are. Because I think we take it for granted a little bit, right? That these women, they so aloof, they all over the place, then they're so far from this group of women is. This group of women is women who absolutely understand the value of hard work, who absolutely understand the value of leadership, who absolutely understand the responsibility that they are carrying, because many of them are first, right, in their spaces. Many of the women that are in this book, they aren't other women. They walk into a room and they're it. Like they're pretty much it. And all my life, I'd always walked into a room where I was it, ever since I was 5 years old. In Zimbabwe, I don't know if I shared previously, but in Zimbabwe, I went to a predominantly white only school
Yes.
just past, post Zimbabwe colonization. And we went from that color segregation to economic segregation, which was still color segregation continued, right? And so you find that I then didn't realize, I mean, I only realized it when I was an adult, that I already had resilience where I was perfectly comfortable in a
Right.
minority, perfectly comfortable. It does not perturb me at all to be the only person in the room that looks like me, because for that was my reality for a
Right.
very, very long time. And when you get to high school, there was a bit more of us, but we were still in the minority. But I went to probably one of the most racist high schools. Like, and the reason I can say that, I'm still friends with a lot of them now, but you found that people within that school, from I guess, my counterparts in the Caucasian space, they did come from grandparents who were colonizers. So that rhetoric just doesn't go away simply because we got independence in 1980. I mean, I was only going to high school 10, 14 years later after independence. So it was, still very much there, the rhetoric laced. And I think, look how old Australia is, and all of that rhetoric is still
For sure.
laced in the things that we do. So I've always had that,
Mm,
and I remember one of a friends of mine said to me, "You don't seem to be perturbed by being in a minority." And I turned around and I said, "Well, why would I be?" And it was only when somebody who was my peer asked me that, "Why are you so comfortable?" that I had to actually step back and think about it, that, oh, why does it not bother me? And then I realized that, oh, historically, when I look at, my learnings, my upbringings, and all of that, I was in that minority. So I had to learn skills to be comfortable. I had to learn skills to lead in that space. And so, fast forward to where I find myself now, I really found there was a space for these women that lead to come together in a safe, supportive environment to build community, to have their voices told. And also, in reality, the young girl who we're trying to inspire just does not have access to these women, right? These women are busy. Their diaries are booked and busy.
mm,
And yet, I have the privilege that they would give up, an hour of their time to talk on a podcast. A lot of them have given up way more than an hour of their time to be contributors to the book. We had, fantastic photo shoot and things like that. But I wanted to amplify these women as the executives that they are. So I wanted to create a luxury photo book. I like to create a luxury coffee. I love coffee table books. I mean, who doesn't love good coffee table book?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, I don't want a book that's on the shelf. I want a book that's a work of art. I want a book that in a boardroom, it draws people to read
Mhm.
and it takes people away from thinking less than. Because I think all the time when women of color are spoken in, there's this undercurrent of less than, there's this undercurrent of subservient, there's this undercurrent no matter where you're talking about it, that is just always in the background. You find that when we have an event, I'll have, a politician want to come and do a ribbon cutting ceremony because it gives them kudos on their plate. Or I would want somebody automatically directing me to a grant, to a charity, to all of these things. And there's nothing wrong with that. My point was that is not the only space that we occupy. We occupy a space of leadership. We occupy a space of entrepreneurship. We occupy that space of business. We occupy that space where we are inventing products. Like if I take you through the different women in the book and just, to give you without giving away too much because people have to read the book. But if you look at just a précis of the women, you have doctors who own medical fields, medical practices, sorry, across, a specific area here in Queensland, who have skincare lines that are being launched in the Middle East. You have one lady who has built the biggest private dental training academy in Australia. You have one woman who has changed, has been part of championing the change of laws around coercive control, who leads an organization that deals with all of the hate that is directed Muslim people and changing that rhetoric around what Islam is and educating people around Islamophobia. You've got women who are leading running finance companies, wealth management companies. You've got one of the ladies is a partner at KPMG, one of the largest of the big four. And there ain't many of us that look like us that are, in that are in that space. You've got women who are PhDs who are leading, some of the biggest health companies in Australia, and they're all in this book. Now, imagine if a girl of color who is aspiring to be an engineer. We've got engineers in this book who's aspiring to own her own business. We've got business owners in this book who's aspiring to be a partner of, one of the big four accounting firms in tax, who's aspiring to be in finance. Finance is not easy. Who's aspiring to get into infrastructure projects. We've got all of these women and they can pick this up and they can see these women, but these women presented in absolute luxury, presented in absolutely the elite C-suite that they are. And that was my vision and that was my intention in bringing these women together in print format in the way that I have done.
What? Oh gosh, where do I begin? Uh, Taking a few steps back to your childhood and growing up and not feeling uncomfortable being a minority, I find that story so beautiful because it shows you that nothing is wasted in life, that everything you go through, it is used for something. Like you can't say, oh, yes, I did go to this institution, so were extremely oppressive or racist, but and as you were saying, there was nothing written. The job description that you have now didn't exist back then. And so nothing is wasted. Everything that you've gone through has really set you up for where you are right now. And I'm just thinking of the power, and even just reading through it, the book that you sent me, the PDF version, and just reading through those women, and I'm like, who are these women? And I was talking to my daughter who's 12 years old, and she's like, Mom, do you know them? I'm like, I know like two women here, not counting Christine. And I just thought, what a powerful book this will be for my daughter and for many of her generation coming up, and even older, older people. And I just keep thinking, especially how influential it is for us who call Australia home. We are migrants, but
Mhm,
this is home for us now. And
mhm.
to see that woman of color in a position of authority, in a
Yeah,
position of influence, in a position of power, it is incredibly powerful in terms of changing the narrative. And
narrative.
so my question is, um, you write about frustrations with stories of women of color being told through the lens of struggle, survival. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like, and I think you're the one who said this maybe when we last spoke, that migrant is a word that is synonymous with just lack and less
Yeah,
than. It's not
boat
something,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Both
came
people.
across a boat. Yeah,
Yeah. And
and
so
that's not our total story.
It it isn't. It is part of some of the story, but it's not the whole story. And that is a story that is often told. And so, what did you want to do with this book in terms of this powerful women telling their stories? Because it's interruption. This is interrupting a narrative that has existed, and we're disrupting that.
Yeah, and exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Let's disrupt the narrative. Let's tell a different story, and let's tell the story with our own voices. These women have voices, right? They don't need other people to tell their story. These women are not lacking in confidence, they're exuding confidence. So let's give them the microphone. Let's give them a platform to really amplify that this is what it looks like from our perspective. Every still executive has a story about, challenges they faced getting it, right? You will never see a story of a white male being sat down and being told from a deficit perspective. It's never told from that, right? It's always told from a positive perspective. Sit down and talk to Jamie Dimon, right? His story is told through what he has achieved, right? Look at Warren Buffett, like all of the Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, all of them. Did they not have struggle in their journey to creating these iconic, brands, in creating these iconic firms that they run? And, you look at your Jack Canfields of the world, and, I'm using names that people would be familiar with to illustrate a point. And my point is when you look at their story, it's told from that heroism perspective. Why, oh, why would we not tell that heroism perspective
Yeah.
of women of color? And why would we not start to amplify their voices from that heroism perspective? It seems, one of the things that in talking to people is like we get to a point where the trauma of our journey is everybody has trauma, I believe, somewhere along the line, right? It just may look a little bit differently. But the trauma that we tell and the way trauma looks like, right, is not the same for everybody. I remember years and years ago when I first came to Australia and I started doing this work, and you become, people start to know you. And I was invited to speak at, I think it was a workshop or something, right? But it was tied to the refugee community. And I was like, what on earth would I know about that?
Yeah.
And the person who's looking at me was kind of confused. I'm like, do you have any idea what my childhood looked like? I
Mm.
have no, I could not, and it would be extremely insulting for
Yeah.
me to even stand there and start to represent a group of people who have been through what they've been through,
Yes.
right? But when you're looking at the story, right? The story is not only the story of trauma, my story is valid too. The traumatic childhood, it's a very spoiled, that's a spoiled book. So, like that story is valid too.
Yes.
That story, I had a dad who was present, fully present. My dad was not educated, but he was fully 1000% present, right, in my life. I have so many stories of him picking me up from school, talking to my teachers with his broken English, and all of these stories. And as a teenager, being, oh God, Dad, please do not, Mom, you
Embarrassing
can't
me.
send Dad to consultation. You really can't. You have to pitch up. You have to come. But now as an adult, I appreciate just how present he
Mm,
was. Like how Black men are portrayed as being completely absent from their daughters' lives. And as women, we're carrying this hole in ourselves trying to fight. I'm not carrying that. Like I was totally and utterly, my dad wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me,
mhm.
right? He was perfect for my sisters. He has flaws, absolutely. What human being doesn't, right? But in terms of being fully hands-on, fully present, and making sure I knew that whatever it is I wanted to do, he was going to break his back to make sure that as daughter I got, and he did. I'm living his dream. I am personification of my father's dream, and so are all my sisters.
Mhm.
And I never grew up in a house where I felt, like I'm sitting there thinking, on what planet would my brother have any more privilege in terms of his education, in terms of all of that than I did?
Yeah.
There was disparity around, household chores, like who doesn't have that? Even in Caucasian communities, you have that. But I'm talking about education. I'm talking about economic opportunities. I'm talking about the things that are going to build my life moving forward. There's no planet that I thought my brother's education, I wasn't raised in that kind of
Yeah.
household.
Yeah.
So where do we get to tell that story?
And I feel like with these stories, as people pick up these books, and maybe you should tell us, who do you picture picking up this book? Who was this book written for? Because my podcast, my listeners, there's a huge percentage of people who listen to this podcast who are white women in business. And they
Mm-hmm,
want to be more inclusive. They want to hear our stories. And
mm-hmm,
they want to not just admire, but they want to take it a next step. They want to, to have accountability. So, who has this book been written for? And there is a responsibility once you pick it up. It's not just a read and
mm-hmm.
put it down. What do you want us to do after that?
So I think for me, the audience is quite broad. So initially, the initial focal audience that kind of got us up was, the little girl, right? Who across, and let's think about it from multiculturalism perspective, right? We are globally a majority, if you think about it, right?
Mhm.
We are globally a majority in the sense that if you look at people of color across the globe, if you take, Africa, Asia, American Indians, Aboriginal, like these are all people of color. If you pick, you've people from Mexico, from India, from the African continent. You've got people from Pakistan. You've got Malaysian people. Like it is such a plethora. You've got people from the US. Like it's a plethora of color, right?
Yeah.
And color, even Asian communities are included in that space. So anyone who is ethically different from your usual Caucasian is represented in this book. Now, our counterparts, and like you, I've got those counterparts who are, ethically responsible for, let's call them the incumbents, right? They're the ones that are in those leadership positions. They are dominating, right?
Mhm.
They all have corporate social responsibility indicators. They've all got KPIs. They all are responsible, right? They are also the audience, right? Which is the audience that you speak of, right? Which
Mhm.
is the eyes, right? So the eyes are also the audience, right? And also the unconverted are the audience. You know why? Because this flies in the face what they think about in terms of capability, right? So if you take the rhetoric around DEI, for example, right? And you listen to what Musk and Trump and all of those people who fall into that faction say. It's all merit based. It's all merit based. It's all merit based. And sorry, I'm parroting a bit because, I get on my soapbox when I talk about this. It's not merit based, right? Because who determines what merit looks like, right? And who determines? It's always the victors, right? And also, you forget that there's a whole generation of people who were barred from entry. So it is not, an equal playing field as much as we might like to think that it is. We're not all starting from the same place, right? And a lot of us as women, we take time off. We, go and have children. We're carers. We're all of these things, right? All of these things take away and erode a lot of our career progression, right? So there are places and spaces for affirmative action, right? There is a space for that, right? So how do you put it in place in a way that actually promotes the message of what we're talking about in Sisters in Color? And who better to champion it than the sisters who know and understand, who have the confidence and who actually have merit listed. I'm here. I am a partner at KPMG. I am a dentist running my own dental practice. I'm a woman who is changing the laws of how women are treated in intimate relationships, how sexual abuse is reported. I am rewriting that legislation. I am running and developing skincare lines. I mean, how many times have you walked in and tried to get shampoo and skincare that works for us?
That's it. Yep.
How many? And what better way than to actually have women of color developing that for women of color? Why wouldn't we support those brands? Why wouldn't we amplify those brands? You're looking at women in tech right now. The CEO of, sorry, the chair of the board of Women of Tech is in the book, and she is a woman of color. Like all of these things, it all of a sudden makes it possible, right? Not only does it make it possible, it then allows all of those that want to be inclusive to actually be able to see it. Because it's one thing to say, okay, in a theoretical world, this is possible, this is possible, this is possible. But what we're offering you in here is a look at, no, it's not possible. It's actually happening. This is not future esoteric thing.
It's
It
happening
is
right now.
and exist right now. And because everybody keeps asking, well, where are they? They're here. They're right here. And they're not happening 10 years from now. And it's been here for quite some time. You just haven't bothered to look.
So true. And several women in the book describe leadership emerging through necessity rather
Yes.
than ambition. What
Yeah.
does that tell us about how leadership actually forms for women of color?
Yeah, I remember there's one lady in particular who talks about. I had to say to her, "Can you stop saying you're accidental? Like you bumped into this. Like you've actually built a lot of this." But a lot of it is even as confident and as vivacious as these women are, there is still that element of, like, and this is me extrapolating, of there's not enough of us there as well, right? So we are still having to fight through some of that. And on a subconscious level, that's there, right? One of the ladies talks about her media experience, and she really inspired me because I reached out to her because my niece at the time was wanting to be in media. She wanted to be a news anchor, right? And then she went for an internship, which she was barred from. Well, she didn't enter the first time. And I said, what reason did they have for rejecting you? I don't know, Auntie. Let's just accept it. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. We don't. We do not just take this lightly here. I am your auntie. That just does not happen. They better have a damned reason why they had to take you. And so she was like, so we figured out a backdoor way for to get into this internship program. And she kept saying to me when she was there, it was with my news, she kept saying to me, Auntie, I don't think they want me. And I'm like, why? She goes, There is nobody here other than people who have blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm like, oh, come on, it cannot be that bad. She goes, it is that bad. And I mean, things have evolved a little bit, but when you go, I mean, take a look at the news. Just take a look at people who read the news. Are you telling me from a merit basis, those are the only people that can read the news? Those are the only people that can anchor the news? They all look the same. And we're out here highly competent. We're out here not having the stages, as Tyler Perry would say, while they're over there doing whatever they're doing, I'm over here in Atlanta building my own table.
That's it.
So, and then now I'm going to invite you to the table. So we're over here building our own table with all of
Mm.
these amazing women. And
Oh,
then we're going to pick and choose who we're going to let
wow.
play in our table. And so that having that level of confidence changes the power dynamic. It changes the game, right? And it changes the rules of engagement. It changes your negotiating power. And it also, and Oprah talks about this a lot of the time when she quotes Maya Angelou, I stand as one, but I come as 10,000, right? And so when you hear that, we are the 10,000,
Mm.
right? And when you're doing your work and representing, you're not just Annie. We're all like there, right there with you. When you look at one of the women leading, she's the chair of women in technology, and she's, leading enterprise. You sit there and you're like, hey, it's not just you.
Absolutely.
We're there too. We are represented.
Mm, mm. And what came through the book as we wind up now, Chris, is faith, culture, heritage. They
Mhm.
appear repeatedly as a theme throughout the book. And I'm wondering, and I probably know what the answer is, but I want to hear what your answer is. Why do you think these threads are often excluded from mainstream leadership conversations? We don't hear that. We don't hear about people's faith or their culture or their heritage. Those things are kind of, it's not spoken of in mainstream leadership, yet that is what shapes us and that's what makes us unique and what we bring to
Mm.
the table.
I think it's not spoken of because especially the God, let's start off with faith, for example, right? We live in a society where we don't want God until we need him, right? Every person I know, including the atheists, at some point have said a prayer when life got really, 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 really tough. And I've got atheist friends, I've got agnostic friends. I respect everyone across the board. But I always say to people, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Like seriously, if I'm going to then believe that this is all there is, that requires a tremendous amount of faith. And I don't have that. So I'm going with the path of, least resistance, which is for me, the faith looks for God. That's what that looks like for me. But with a lot of us from multicultural background, faith is a good thing. Faith is the thing that sort of anchored all of us. If you look at how we are defined in our culture. A lot of us are defined through our faith. If you look at any culture, you can pick it, right? Even your Buddhism, your Hinduism, your all these different ethnicities. Faith is a core part of that. So obviously, you don't lose that essence of who your identity is when you get into that leadership space. You understand, again, quoting Oprah, I come, I stand as one, but I come as many. That comes from the rhetoric of if all of the spirits, all of the ancestors, and everything that has got me to this point, and you find that that's a common thread
Mm.
amongst multicultural people, that belief that and that respect of those that came before. You'll find almost every single multicultural community respects their elders, right?
Yes.
Respects the wisdom that comes with age, right? And automatically we bow down to that because we know that that is you've earned your stripes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas you find in a lot of Caucasian spaces, youth is what is valued, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my 21-year-old, he can barely get himself, to the front door, let alone what wisdom is he going to tell me? He looks cute, that's about it. That's all he's serving with the world at the moment. He has not earned his stripes. right? Whereas if I'm sitting at the feet of my 83-year-old mother who wrote forward for the book,
Mm.
and it was really important for me to bring the voices of who I am, and just like what you said, right? It says there's right at the beginning, it says Dirimwana wa Rafael and Mavis. That means I am the daughter of Rafael and Mavis Mudavanhu. And because I know who I am, I know my heritage, everything is possible for me. And I think women of color, we are so anchored in who we are because that's what we have to give initially, who we are. So I think once we arrive at that space, we don't lose that essence because we know who we are. And when we actually strip the veil of what the world is trying to box us in and we embrace who we are at our core, that's when our power really erupts and comes out. So I think that's why you don't see it as much in mainstream leadership, but you see it coming out more because we've arrived. I'm no longer apologizing. I'm no longer apologizing because my name is Rudairo. I am an answer to a prayer. I'm an answer to somebody's prayer. So I'm not apologizing for that. I'm not hiding from that, right? I'm not ashamed of anything that represents. If anything, that is where my power comes from. So once I have the confidence to stand on my own, I all of a sudden, then, like I said, we're building the table here. These are the rules of engagement at this table. You want to play, right? This is the tip to play.
My goodness. Oh, okay. Alrighty. So I absolutely, yeah, let's go back to mom. Mom did such an incredible forward. She shared it like a mom, like as a
Mm-hmm.
mom would. And I love how she was using Shona language and then she'd give a description of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I loved how she shared that. And even just sharing about your dad and how much he loved you and cared for you and wanted the best. And, you've come from a strong family, strong roots, deep roots. And it really, she amplified that. Her voice really has made the book shine. And what do you hope changes? And not just for the individual who will pick up the book, but structurally, because this book now exists, this is something that wasn't there. And just to remind you listening that yes, there might be books out there written by women of color or amplifying women of color, but we're talking a very specific niche here. These are women in the C-suite. We hear
Mm-hmm.
of, we look at from afar, we admire, and all their stories have been compiled and put together. Sisters in color. What are you hoping changes structurally because this book now exists?
What I'm hoping changes structurally is how we see ourselves. What I'm hoping, because I think for far too long, and Smith said it when Barack Obama was elected, which was I believed it. I actually thought it was possible, but until I actually saw it, I didn't actually know it was possible. So I think there is still that element of yeah, we know it's possible, we know it's possible, we know it's possible, we know it's possible. But the more we actually see it, then we can actually believe it. So, what I hope changes structurally is how we see leadership, how we see leaders, how we see the face of that, how we see it evolving and changing, and how we see that we are occupying it. Not we can, we are occupying that. It is present, it is happening now. That's what I hope changes structurally.
I love that so much. My final question, if fear, and this is a question that I ask all my guests, if fear wasn't a factor, how do you think you might show up more in your work, Christine?
I love that question. Do you know what fear does? Fear does the opposite for me. Um, it it gives me fuel. I'm afraid to not show up, right? If I don't show up, if not me, then who? I ask myself that question, right? And that's what I hope everybody starts to ask that question of themselves. Whatever it is, whatever that looks like, right? For you. If you don't show up, then who are you expecting to show up? You should have the fear of not showing up rather than the fear of showing up. Do you know what I mean? Because you can change just a few words, that, right? So rather than fear of showing up, you should have the fear of not showing up, right? Because when we think about the people that have changed the trajectory of history, right? They are the ones who actually said to themselves, okay, it has to be me. Like, it just has to be. If I don't show up, because nobody else is coming to rescue you.
Mm-hmm.
Newsflash, nobody. Absolutely nobody's coming to rescue you. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to be the savior of the day for you. And whatever change you want to see in the world. So for me, I want to see more women that look like me in leadership. End of story. What fuels me? That's what fuels me. So how do I contribute to changing that? Right? I'm only one person. How do I contribute to that? How do I gather the army of people that are changing how do I amplify that?
Wow, Christine Mudavanhu, thank you so much. I want to give away 3 books. So if you're listening and you're like, where can I get this book from? Christine, tell us where they can get it from. But 3 of my listeners, I want to gift this book to you. It's a beautiful, hold it up again, beautiful coffee table book. Look at that.
And the cover has a whole story. So
Oh,
you've got to get it
and
to understand the
show the
cover.
back because it's got the photo of you at the back. Look at that.
Got a photo of me, yours truly.
That is so gorgeous. So where can they get it, Christine?
So I will provide you with the link. It's available through Shopify store. You can get it there. We ship all around Australia. So yeah, order it through there.
Oh, beautiful. The link will be in the show notes. Again, if you're listening and you really want to have this book, I'd love to gift it to you. All you need to do is tag me on Instagram, in your stories, and let me know what was your biggest takeaway from this conversation. And I will be sending that book over to you. 3 to give away. So please, please, please do get onto the stories, tag me and let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, Christine. You are, I don't know, I feel fueled up when I speak to you. I feel unstoppable when I speak to you. There's just something incredibly um, fueling about you. Like you fill up my cup, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. What am I sitting around doing? I need to move. I need to show up. And you've just added so much fuel, and it's a beautiful thing at the beginning of the year to have that feeling and to hold on to that. And I also just want to echo what your mom said, your name, Rudairo, which is an answered prayer. And I believe this book for you listening is an answered prayer that, especially if you're a woman of color who's listening and you never knew that something like this could be possible, it's an answered prayer. Maybe it's a prayer that you prayed that is different, but you read this book and you see so many possibilities and you feel your cup being filled up the same way Christine has fueled up my cup. And I feel like I hope that your cup has been fueled too. So your name is an answered prayer, but I also feel that this book, Sisters in Color, is an answered prayer. So thank you so much for your obedience, for everything it took to print this book. And we're rallying behind you. We're believing in you. And thank you so much for asking me to be on this podcast. I'm so honored to have had this conversation with you, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie, and thank you so much for allowing me to be on your platform, engage with your audience, talk about, the things that I'm passionate about and share a little bit of my world too. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate and value that. And my cup is overflowing too.